Is it indeed true that the naval supremacy of England has passed away like a mere unsubstantial exhalation under the light of that memorable Saturday, March 8th, 1862? An American journalist tells us this, but we may pardon the exulting boast when we remember the provocation. It was but a few weeks ago that English journalists of the highest character and position were complacently announcing that we should, in the event of war, at once sweep the seas of all American shipping. That prediction was a very wild and foolish one. Let us inquire whether this new prediction is not equally groundless. I were reading a marvelous tome,
Yes.
the Wikipedia.
Again.
It told me things. It told me about the most important battle in naval history.
Lepanto?
No.
The Spanish Armada.
No.
Midway.
No.
The Second Battle of Savo Island.
Almost.
Tangier Bay.
Hampton Roads, where two ironclads shocked the world as they battled and such.
Not really.
No?
No.
Okay. The most important battle in American naval history.
More than Midway?
Okay, hang on. The most important battle. The first battle that involved ironclads.
No, it wasn't.
Okay, hang on. This is a big deal. Okay. The first rotating turret.
No.
Okay, hang on. I got this, because this is a huge deal. Huge America deal, okay? The first battle where two ironclads shot at each other.
Yes.
Checkmate, Lincoln.
And your point? What was so great about that?
It was a big deal. The whole world was shocked.
Nobody knew what was going to happen?
No one knew anything.
Well, if Wikipedia says it, I'm convinced.
Yes. Wooden ships were immediately obsolete.
No one knew that.
It was amazing. It changed the world forever. It changed naval design forever. No one wasn't talking about Hampton Roads.
And the revolving turret was brilliant. It was a revolutionary breakthrough that no one had ever seen or thought of before. You're right. I am convinced.
Well, we are convinced, and that is the end of our episode. Yes. Well, as you can see, we are here to discuss yet another historical misconception. As incurable contrarians, we cannot stop calling people wrong on the internet. We just can't. We're here to discuss the Battle of Hampton Roads and what things were revolutionary about it and maybe some things that absolutely weren't. Before we get started with that discussion, the beneficent Captain Gibbons has provided lighting unto us, and to fix the first most complained about thing on this channel, second most complained about thing on this channel. The first would probably be perfidiousness.
No, on this channel?
Yes. But the second thing would be sound quality, and hopefully
they're working.
If you don't hit them, and now that we finally turned the fan off, you can hear us. So now you can see and hear the pedantry in full HD. Amazing. Another thing we have to mention, would you like to talk about the bottle?
Time, because I'm getting so thirsty. So, Our friend Matthew, who we've known for, I don't know, basically my adult life, aka the Historical Gamer, with a channel that's definitely worth checking out, presented to me this bottle of 18-year-old Scotch, since I'm fond of Scotch, and as a Army captain, 12 to 15 years is like my range. As a lieutenant, you're like 12 years and younger or blended.
This is a Colonel Scotch.
This is like Colonel level Scotch. Yeah, so this is definitely above my pay grade. It's been tempting me for a long time. So can I open it?
You may open it on the camera.
Glenmorangie. I have never had their 18.
So a big thank you to the Historical Gamer. If you haven't checked out his channel, it's very exceptional. He's always talking about naval things. Hopefully he agrees with us on some of these things. I know he is quite adept at naval history, so I'm looking forward to his response to our pedantry here. And I'm usually a teetotaler, but I think I shall partake in this madness.
You have to let it rest at least a few minutes.
Ah, okay. Yes.
It's 18-year-old Scotch.
Okay. And now,
so actually, the Battle of Hampton Roads wasn't a surprise to anyone. It didn't really have anything revolutionary or new, and it didn't really change what was already well underway in the navies of Europe and already even in the United States.
So I think our thesis then really is that it's a confirmation, it's a proof of concept.
Yes.
Rather than a groundbreaking, shocking the world battle.
There was almost nothing new at Hampton Roads.
So let's go through that. Let's start by talking about...
Cue the angry comments.
Yes, cue the angry comments. I mean, if you have an angry comment, please leave it. All comments are good comments.
We might actually make a video about your angry comments later.
Yes, then we'll have another video to do. Please, defend the Monitor. It will be great. So let's start with the Monitor, because we have to talk about both Monitor and Virginia. Let's start with the turret, because a lot of people claim it's the first turret, being involved in combat.
You hear that all the time. Like it's the first ship with a revolving turret.
So let's talk about that.
Because they've found the Monitor, they've brought the turret back up, it's being restored, and when they first found it and brought it back up, that was when every documentary and every YouTube video is saying the most revolutionary naval artifact ever recovered, the first revolving turret, the first turret, because obviously ships after that had turrets. Yeah. But it wasn't the first turret. Ericsson wasn't even the first person to have an idea for a turret. So it was a British naval captain, Captain Cowper Coles, who served in the Crimea, patented the revolving naval armored turret in September 1859. Took out a patent for it with drawings, and he shows his turret, and it was a hemispherical turret, so it wasn't slab-sided, and the reason for that was important because the Monitor's turret squared off walls. It's just a perfect cylinder. So if you're receiving fire from that, that's a 90-degree angle to receive incoming fire, which is the easiest angle to penetrate.
Mm-hmm.
And Captain Coles, in his patent, specifically said it needs to be angled to make it less likely to be penetrated by enemy fire. Mm-hmm. So 1859, he has this idea. He puts an experimental turret on a ship, and before the Monitor was even launched, before it was complete or in existence, he had convinced the Royal Navy's Board of the Admiralty to build one of his ships. And so they were already, this is before the Monitor is laid down, so this is pre-German pre-February 1862. The Admiralty is already building ironclads. The Warrior is already practically, well, it might already have been done by February 62.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I mean, it's not like ironclads or anything
No,
new.
Warrior and Gloire are both
and
out
many
and ready
others.
to go.
He convinces the Admiralty to go along with turrets.
Yeah.
So they didn't need the Battle of Hampton Roads to convince them, like, you know, go blimey, look at these beautiful ideas the Americans come up with. We're going to copy them. Independently of Erickson and the Monitor, the Royal Navy was already planning a ship, the HMS Prince Albert, that had 4 revolving turrets on it.
And we're not saying that Erickson stole his design. We wouldn't dare do something like that. But it's
he did claim he came up with the idea in 1854 and proposed it in 54, and he very well may have.
But there are independent people that are all coming up with these ideas.
And that idea, we get to that point, and we got to kind of rewind to your favorite time in history, at least your favorite war of all time.
1453.
And it involves second favorite.
Oh, okay.
It involves the same people though.
Ooh.
Yes.
Oh yes. 1853.
So as everybody knows,
a great time
when the Russian Empire goes to war with poor little Turkey.
Poor little sick little Turkey.
The Russian fleet attacked the Ottoman fleet at Sinope. The Ottoman fleet was at anchor, and it was an old-fashioned sail-powered navy.
Well, they had steamships, some of them,
but they weren't underway.
Yeah,
like 3 of them.
Okay.
3 little tugboats.
Okay. They were ready.
They were ready.
Oh yes.
And the Russian fleet comes in under steam out of the Black Sea. It's kind of a surprise attack, like almost, the Pearl Harbor of its day. The Russians had steam power, so they could maneuver without the wind being in their favor. Mm-hmm. So they could steam in whatever direction they wanted to without the wind dictating where they went. And they also had a new type of gun. So in the late 1840s, early 1850s, there's a new smoothbore style of gun that could fire a shell instead of a solid cannonball. So the shell, full of gunpowder, you fire it out of these guns, Pycon's guns.
Yes, we've spent most of our research tonight
just
was
learning
on how to pronounce
Pycons. No?
I think it's Pegson.
Pegson.
Yes. Pegson.
All right, these Pike's Hands guns.
These Pike's Hands guns.
Shell guns. Can we call them shell guns?
The shell guns. And it really is. The Sinope is a picturesque battle because these are
lots of colorful explosions.
If you like drawing naval explosions,
you need a lot of cadmium red.
Yes.
To color in the Battle of Sinope.
Yes. So it's
yes.
It's it would be a interesting battle to see.
Yeah.
So,
but that reverberated through far more, I would argue, far more than the impact of Hampton Roads.
Absolutely.
Reverberated through Europe because at the Battle of Sinope, the wooden ship was, you can't call it obsolete because you really didn't have anything to replace it with. So it's not like its replacement had appeared, but in the second half of the 19th century, there was a ping pong of back and forth between the power of gunnery and armor. And so the first move on that checkerboard, so to speak, was Sinope with the shell gun.
That's
so that
the whole reason why you're armoring your ships now.
Yes.
Because of these more powerful
guns.
Because
the problem is understood. In 1853, again, reverberations through Europe, and everyone who has wooden ships are now vulnerable to these shell guns. They're not terribly hard to make. It took a little engineering to figure out how to launch a explosive shell, a large, heavy explosive shell out of a big naval gun. But once that was figured out, you fire a 200-pound shell with 30, 40 pounds of gunpowder in it into a wooden ship, and that thing explodes.
Yeah.
It's just carnage, and it was carnage on a massive scale. The entire Ottoman fleet was wiped out in a day, or at least the majority of the fighting fleet. And the Russian army or the Russian Navy had profound superiority until the arrival of the British.
For Allied intervention. No, but for Allied intervention, I mean, because it's so one-sided.
Yeah,
it's very clear now the Russians
most
can
lopsided battles ever in military history. But everyone, and by everyone I mean all of the powers of Europe and the United States to an extent, understood the problem now. There is a new type of weapon that is incredibly damaging to our ships. And so they were already looking for a way, how do we defeat this new type of weapon? How can we protect our wooden ships from these shell guns, which were also used in fortifications, which takes us to
floating batteries.
So also in your favorite war,
yes,
the French were
not
among
my favorite.
The French?
No.
Good. But they were smart enough to clad their batteries. So these are boats, ships. They don't have engines in them. They have to be towed, but they look very similar to like a Confederate style ironclad for good reason.
Now, that's where I'm going to take over and start my rant on the design of the Virginia. And remind me to come back to these floating batteries. But while I remember, we have to talk about, even in the 18th century, this is the shape of a floating battery. It is two angled sides and a very just standard looking barge. It's not a it's exactly what has been done on floating batteries for more than
100 years.
More than 100 years.
All
at
they
this
did
point
was slap some iron
this is
over the top of it.
I'll put up a picture of the floating battery at Gibraltar in the 1780s, and then compare that with the floating batteries at in the Crimean War. And what was the battle? Kinburn. And then you have the CSS Virginia, but it's not some sort of groundbreaking design.
No, it's been around, and it was. But again, the Russians have these shell guns.
So the key
batteries
is putting
are
the
vulnerable.
armor on it.
Yes. So the armor is, again, you're moving. It's the checkerboard of gun versus armor.
And some of those mortar batteries, I know some of them in the Baltic region were iron hulled too.
Oh, I'm not sure.
Yeah, they because there was a lot of naval design that went into the Baltic theater, particularly with the shelling of Kronstadt and as they move more and more into the Baltic theater, it's there's a lot of advances there that we have mentioned in our French war scare video. That both the British and the French are looking at each other's naval designs and raising an eyebrow. But as the guns get more powerful, the armor gets more powerful, and then the guns get more powerful, and that's the first moves are in the 1850s.
Yeah, but the gun doesn't have. I mean, the shell gun only has its day relatively briefly, because once you slap this armor plate on the batteries, now they're impervious to your shells. And actually a shell, and by shell I mean a hollow projectile with powder in it, is intrinsically weak. It's not solid. So if you fire one of those against armor, it's just going to break up. Yeah, it might ignite, but you're just going to have a big poof of flash in the pan type powder. It's not smashing into your ship and then exploding and shattering it.
Yeah, and some of the heavier wooden frigates aren't automatically destroyed by any type of shell. Like you have some of the heavier frigates like Cumberland is not completely destroyed by shell fire. It's destroyed by something else.
Yes, we'll get there, I'm sure.
But we'll get there in a minute.
So, armor on a ship.
Armor on a ship.
Not
back to this.
Not new. By March 8th, 1862, when the Virginia steamed out, it wasn't like it was embarking on this unprecedented, brand new, this has never happened before, this is all the first time it's happened. It wasn't the case. Ironclads had, by that point, already seen incredible amounts of combat in the American Civil War. The Virginia was not the first ironclad in a battle. The Union had many ironclads, the Cairo class and the
they were designed to take those shells as they're moving down the river, and they're not always as I talked about in my War in the West series, the gunboats are outmatched.
You were on the Cairo, weren't you? Did you go?
Yeah. A lot of the gunboats were outmatched by batteries. And
the armor on the river boats was very thin, also.
And a lot of times you had to run the gauntlet.
Yeah. But even in the mouth of the Mississippi, the Confederates had a ironclad, CSS Manassas.
The ironclad
not
ram.
A very good one. It had like one gun poking out of it, but they ran that thing out there and it fought against the Union Navy.
Yep.
In I want to say late 1861, I think, those early battles. So that
I think it's early 1862.
Was it?
Yeah, because that's around the time with Forts Jackson and St. Philip, when Farragut's moving up.
Well, it's definitely trading fire with wooden Union ships, and the Confederate ironclad are shooting at each other.
And there are other
before Hampton Roads.
There are other Confederate ironclads on the Mississippi that are having engine troubles and other design troubles of their own, but there are ironclads out there in the early days of the Civil War.
Now, how many ironclads existed or were already being built when the Revolutionary Monitor was laid down?
Are you saying that I wrote this down?
Yes.
Well, France has Gloire and Invincible and
which are ocean
Normandy and Corona and Magenta and Solferino.
Oh, was that all? They only have 6?
And Britain has Warrior and Black Prince and Defense and Resistance, and under construction are Hector and Achilles and Minotaur and Agincourt and Northumberland and Prince Consort and Caledonia, and Austria has a lot of them under construction. Dracus, Salamander, Kaiser Max, Prince Eugen, Habsburg, Erzherzog, Ferdinand Max, Don Juan d'Austria. Spain has Tetuan under construction, and this is my favorite. Italy has an ironclad before Monitor launches.
So does Italy even technically exist?
They have Terribile. They do exist. They do exist. In 1861, it is the Kingdom of Italy, after Garibaldi.
So Italy has an ironclad.
Italy has an ironclad.
The Ottomans are about to start building one.
They are about to lay it down.
The French have, 6 or 7?
Yes.
Ocean-going ironclad warships. And the British have several more. I mean, the Warriors are very, very large, very heavy armored ships.
Warrior and Black Prince are the twin ships. So,
again, everyone, right down to the Spanish and the Italians and the Habsburgs. If the Habsburgs are ahead of you, you're not doing anything revolutionary, okay?
No.
So everyone learned that lesson. Battle of Sinope. Holy cow, the shell gun is the killer of the wooden warship. We got to slap iron on our hulls to stop those shells. They probably would have made a lot more, because then the question goes, oh, well, if that's the case, Why did they even still bother building any wooden ships? It's because very, very, very few shipyards in 1861 could build iron ships. That was just an iron ship itself. An iron-hulled ship is revolutionary. It is brand new. That's the real technology. That's the real breakthrough, is building a ship that can support its own weight in the water without buckling. And Europe has them steaming all around. So when Monitor appears, and Monitor wasn't even the first Union ironclad on the East Coast. The Galena was already around. The new Ironsides, was it either complete or still under construction?
The Coast Guard had an ironclad first.
Yes.
Yes.
The Revenue Cutter Service.
The Revenue Cutter Service had its ironclad based off of Stevens Battery.
So
very exciting. Yes. Is it time?
Yes. It could be time.
Yes.
Yes. Oh man.
The Scotch tasting is a different channel.
I love Glenmorangie. Thanks, Matt.
I am a teetotaler. It is totally lost on me. It tastes like Scotch.
I'm not. I don't know enough to be a snob. I know just enough to be dangerous. But there is a difference. Like if I was to give you like a 3-year-old blended Scotch right now, you could tell.
Mm-hmm.
You'd be like, oh wow. Just by the just the aging of it.
Oh, it is very smooth.
It smooths it out,
yeah.
And I don't know why. I can't explain. I'm not enough of a snob. Maybe Major Gibbons
yes.
can go more into detail.
When
on
you
that.
have more of a collection.
Yes, but no, it's always a treat. A real aged, mellowed. It's very complex for a Glenmorangie.
So back on topic. It's not the first ironclads that debut in the world or even in the Civil War.
Not the first ironclad to have a turret. Not the first turret.
Yeah, the design of the River Monitor. Let's talk about Monitor too. It's very similar to Stevens Battery, where we have you have that very low floating, designed to be a coastal operations monitor. The Virginia is a floating battery straight out of the 1780s.
Yeah, it's a French bombardment battery at Kinburn.
Yep.
With an engine.
Or it's a British battery at Gibraltar.
And there's not much of a leap. It's not a great technological jump to go from. We've seen these armored bombardment batteries in the Crimean War to, well, we happen to have this hull with an engine in it. Let's just slap a battery on the top, a casemate, as it were, and now we have a ironclad.
So let's quickly go over, now that we did all the what it's not, let's briefly go over what happened in the Battle of Hampton Roads. We had the Union blockade, attempting blockading the entire Confederate coast, but there was a particular focus around the Chesapeake Bay. And the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay is Hampton Roads, and you have Norfolk, the Confederate naval base right there, right across from Fortress Monroe. And they steam out Virginia to an unsuspecting blockading squadron, and it engages Cumberland among other ships. But it successfully rams Cumberland and sinks her. The Wikipedia had things to say about that.
Oh,
Do you want to hear them?
Hold on.
It's considered to be a turning point in the history of world naval affairs, as it showed the advantage of steam. Oh, I have terrible handwriting. The advantage of steam-powered armored ships over sail-powered wooden-hulled ships.
This surprised the ironclad Virginia, which had rifled guns on it and shell guns, Dahlgrens, smaller Dahlgrens, not as large as the ones on the Monitor, but when the Virginia went out on March 8th, it was, the wolf in the hen house, and it only brought on shell. They did not, the only solid shot they got was enough to heat up red hot shot for shooting into the hulls of the wooden warships. So they didn't think about, we might need to fight an ironclad, because they only brought the shells
because they were expecting to fight the wooden warships. Yeah.
And so when it was a foregone conclusion, and what it did is it proved the concept. You take a floating battery, you put an engine on it, and you make it able to move itself. That floating battery can move itself right up to a wooden ship and blast it into pieces and be almost impervious to return fire. Everyone already knew that. Everyone was already building ironclads for that exact reason. It proved a concept. It didn't announce to the world a massive change is here. What it announced was what we thought would happen happened. We're on the right track. It confirmed things.
And it's not like the U.S. Navy pitted the Cumberland against the Virginia. It's just the Virginia unsuspectingly steamed over to these warships who, given any amount of time, would have just gone out to sea or put, significant distance between them. And, there was a lot that they could do that you couldn't really do when you're in the middle of Hampton Roads.
Mm-hmm. Well, even the Congress in the Minnesota tried to escape.
Yeah. Does Congress run aground?
Minnesota burns and Congress runs aground, as I recall. I could be wrong. The comment warriors will.
That could have been a game we were playing.
That's the problem, is when you do these historical games. Thank you again, Matt. Your versions of reality. I don't know what was real and what's so not. Many.
Okay. Yes.
But the Union knew the Virginia was coming. And
so the next day,
yes,
somebody comes around the corner.
That they had rushed because the Union had received intelligence that the Virginia is making progress.
Mm-hmm.
And so they knew, the Union knew, you put the Virginia in there with all the wooden ships, they know what's going to happen. It's already, it's understood. It's going to surprise no one. There's panic that it's going to steam up the Potomac and shell the White House.
Absolutely.
There's real, this thing cannot be stopped. So the Monitor is rushed. 101 days it took to build the Monitor, which is remarkable in itself. But they immediately send it. Where do they send it? Right, first place, straight to Hampton Roads to counter the Virginia. Because
so
what they knew was going to happen happened. And it appears, and then something else they knew was going to happen happened. The two ironclads could not defeat each other. Or, I don't want to say they knew that was what was going to happen, but neither of them were prepared to fight another ironclad. The Virginia especially. The Virginia,
because they were both in theory prepared to defeat another ironclad.
In theory. So the Monitor was supposed to have 15-inch Dahlgrens. These are, this is like the pinnacle that the shell gun ever reached. So it's a smooth bore, and the reason you want a smooth bore is, what's better than a rifle about a smooth bore?
Higher velocity.
Higher velocity. The ball doesn't have to expand, or the shell isn't gripping rifling, causing massive amounts of friction. The shell just slides straight out the barrel. Now, it's not going to spin. It's not going to be as accurate as a rifle.
But a river monitor, you're going to get up close.
And for long range, like if you're shelling, like say, a Fort Pulaski, for instance,
Okay.
a rifled elongated shell is much better for that because it's delivering more energy. But if you're up close, just like with Brown Bess, if you're up close, you get high velocity, and that is just gonna smash at your point blank range. So, but didn't have 15-inch Dahlgrens, so they gave them 11-inch Dahlgrens.
And then those are further weakened by the charges.
Because this is an era when guns explode.
Yeah,
all
absolutely.
the time.
Everyone
Guns
is
are
terrified
going
of.
off.
And Parrott guns did explode. The whole premise of the
Wasn't there one
Dahlgren.
with the Secretary of the Navy that blew up right before the Civil War and killed like several important people?
And the whole premise of the Dahlgren is that
The pressure
it's
curve.
reinforced
Right.
at the back. And even the Dahlgren had the danger of possibly exploding. And so what happened during the engagement? They did not load the full charges, the full powder charges behind their shells. And didn't explode the gun.
15 pounds of powder when they later found that these guns could easily handle 30 pounds of powder.
Because
so
that was the
double.
whole premise of the Dahlgren.
If they had used the 30-pound charge, they probably would have punched the Virginia.
Or at least cracked.
Now, on the other side of that coin, the Virginia steamed out on the morning of the 9th, still badly shot up. Her funnel was badly riddled. The muzzles of one of her Dahlgren guns had been shot off. But all Virginia expected to do was go out and finish off, a couple wooden ships and kind of call it a day. But here's the Monitor. The Virginia did not bring any solid shots. So even by March of 1862, they had an idea of how do we defeat armor. So iron armor in 1862 is just that. It is rolled iron plate, very brittle, very soft by armor standards. And only as the century went on and steel, you start to get Harvey steel, then you get the various forms of Krupp steel as we approach the 20th century, and you can have much more protection for inches and weight of armor. Well, 1862, there's only one type of armor, and it's iron, and you can put ironwood. They did all these different. They tried lattice working, all these different methods for how to do it, but it's just iron. You can punch brittle iron if you hit it squarely. You can crack it. You can buckle it with impact, even if you have relatively low velocity guns, which you did with black powder. You can't get around black powder. That's the only propellant you've got. You can only push this projectile so quickly. So they already they're called bolts, and they're already, because after the Crimean War, everybody, and I mean everyone in Europe and the United States, grabbed some pieces of iron and shot cannons at them to see, A, will the iron really stop a shell or a projectile? B, how much of the stuff do we have to bolt onto our ships? And C, let's try practicing with different types of projectiles to see what can defeat that armor, because it does no good if you slap armor on your ship, but the enemy is, you're just going to bounce shot off of each other. So these bolts were mostly iron, but the heads of these bolts they're a form of primitive mild steel. So it's chilled shot is what it was called. So the head was very hard, like a punch, like you're punching through leather. And that was the concept. They're flat-headed, and just by sheer weight of impact, it would want to punch or crack its way through the armor. These things were around, but the Virginia didn't bring any of them out because she wasn't planning on fighting an ironclad. She had 7-inch Brook rifles on her, and if those Brook rifles had bolts, solid bolts, the armor of the Monitor is on the turret. It's 8 inches thick, so it's pretty substantial, but not really, and if you cracked it several times with a heavy bolt, you could probably start getting through.
And we
it
know
was
that-
bad enough that Monitor turned its turret away, just so that nothing could get through the openings of the turret while they were reloading.
And we know that the bolts were effective later in the war,
Oh, yes.
especially from forts. That, you know,
Oh, yeah.
ironclads.
The Keokuk got
Yeah.
taken down by gunfire
Mhm.
that defeated its armor. So, again, the Hampton Roads could have gone either way. If the Virginia had their solid shot on board, the Virginia might have. Can you imagine? It wouldn't take very many bolts going through the turret of the Monitor to disable the ship and make her run.
Yeah.
And if the Monitor was using 30-pound charges, probably would have been blowing through. The Monitor, or at least that straight-walled turret, it's that in itself, yes, it's revolutionary. It's the first, definitely the first, indisputably first turret in action. But it was primitive in the sense that the armor was vertical. It was a straight wall. Even Captain Cole wanted the sloped armor so that a shell would deflect. And so the Virginia had that. It's much harder to penetrate sloping armor, much easier to penetrate perpendicular armor like the Monitor had.
Now, I always have to connect it to Britain somehow. Someone thought it might be interesting. And Milne, who was the admiral commanding the North American squadron, actually ordered a British ship to loiter, I think was the terminology, off of Fortress Monroe and see if anything could be seen. So people were curious. They were curious about Hampton Roads, but I would be interested to hear what you have to think, what you have to say about, did it alter naval design?
It made some things more popular. So turrets were confirmed. Again, it proved these principles. Turrets were confirmed as a really good idea.
Okay.
So after Hampton Roads, like, yes, this concept works. Did Hampton Roads itself influence naval design? I don't think so. The Virginia was obsolete the day she steamed down the Elizabeth River. In terms of 1862 ironclad warship design, she was obsolete. And the Monitor, and you can read this in the parliamentary debates, where there was a brief panic that the Americans have this amazing new ship, but anyone who knew anything realized it's a glorified harbor picket boat. It really can't, it's not going to come over here.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, we can send Warrior all the way over there across the Atlantic if we wanted to. No, I don't think it...
It does increase the popularity of the Ram in theory.
Oh, the Ram for sure.
And
yes.
and not just in naval design, but in the tactics.
And in fact,
a lot of the ships that are the next big engagement in the world of ironclads, the Battle of Lissa. A lot of those ships are already laid down by the time that the engagement happens. You know, a lot of those Austrian ships that are very ram heavy.
I would argue the takeaway from Hampton Roads was more about the Virginia's ram than it was about the revolving turret on the Monitor. We are obsessed with the revolving turret. And it's the first revolving turret on a warship in combat. It's true. But it wasn't new. Other countries were already starting to build them.
Mm-hmm.
It had been patented for 3 years at this point. and had already been demonstrated. One had already been built and put on a ship by Coles as a example. So it's new and it's a good idea, and the Hampton Roads confirms it as a good idea, and it is the way forward in ship design. Captain Coles designed some very modern looking ships. Some of his designs weren't very good. In fact, he found that out the hard way when he went down with HMS Captain,
Yes.
which was inherently unstable. The son of Colonel Boxer, the superintendent of the Royal Laboratory, who we've spoken about frequently, also went down on the Captain.
But some of those designs are recognizable in later British battleships.
You can see the modern battleship in them.
In
They're
1860.
embryonic. Guns on turrets on the center line, superstructure in the center, armored belt. They're heading in that direction. You start to see like the Devastation class, breastwork monitor starts to appear. But the Ram, because again, you've got this cat and mouse game between guns and armor, and if the armor is too strong for the gun, you have to come up with another way to sink the ship. So if they're impervious to your shot and I'm impervious to their shot, guess we got a ram.
Yeah.
And so that really influenced for the next 70 years warships are coming out. I mean, even in the 1890s, there's some ships that very light armament in terms of guns and a very prominent ram in the theory that will just close, and because to blast a ship down with gunnery takes a lot of time. But if you and almost all of the damage is above the waterline. But if you puncture the hull with a massive rupture below the waterline, the job's done in one quick blow. So if you're already within arm's reach,
and that's what
it out,
we see at Lissa first too.
Yes, and then and that just and again it goes back and forth. The guns. So in the 1870s, modern propellants are starting to appear. New prismatic powders, and then by the time it gets to the 1880s, modern propellants. The velocities are getting higher and higher and higher, and this metallurgy is getting improved. So you're getting shells that can designs that can penetrate armor, and then the armor starts improving as well. And the ships are also getting faster. They're getting much bigger. But what Hampton Roads itself influenced, if there's a dotted line between Sinope and the modern battleship, it's like one of those dots in the line. Of course, being an American battle and the first time two ironclads fought each other, it's entered into the stuff of legend. It's our battle, and like so many things in the Civil War, from trenches to rifles to Gatling guns. Like, we figured this out here while the backwards Europeans had to relearn this stuff later. The truth is, honestly, not as glamorous.
Yeah, the truth is that professional militaries knew these concepts, and it's really American exceptionalism that breeds that myth that we have to say this horrible thing happened, the world was shocked by it, and it might have appeared in the newspaper in London, but at the end of the day it didn't change much, and it wasn't as groundbreaking as we like to think.
Yeah, it confirmed what they already knew was the case.
Yeah.
Wooden ships are incredibly vulnerable to shell fire. Ironclads can easily defeat a wooden ship, and ironclads are going to have a hard time defeating each other in the future. And we have to come up with ways, whether it's higher powered guns, different shells or rams
And
or
for the next century,
torpedoes.
it will be that.
Was the torpedo itself was just, how do we get around the armor? We can't defeat the armor with guns,
So it's
so
armor,
therefore
weapons, armor,
we
weapons.
just go under the water
Yes.
and get at them where they're not armored.
Yeah.
So,
So any other concepts we need to dispel? Anything you can think of? What was my
No,
surprise?
Not dispel. Okay, so there were. I was going to say there's 3 things that did come from the Battle of Hampton Roads.
Ooh, I'm ready.
Kind of beat one to death.
I'm ready.
The first one. Where's my list here?
Looking at notes, ridiculous.
The steam-powered turret. Now this
Okay.
was a American innovation, or at least the first one to put it into use. Is that the turret on the Monitor was operated by steam, by an engine. Now the engine wasn't very good. It was hard to put it in reverse. In fact, it was easier just to go all the way around
Yes.
one way.
Yes.
And because it was run off of leather belts, and after they've been running a while and everything gets all nice, hot and steamy down in the
Hilarious,
steam
yeah.
shift, it starts.
Yeah.
So it works. When it's working one way, it works. But the Coles turret was rotated by hand, and a lot of the early British warships were rotated by hand. They liked them by hand because it unlike the steam where you had to go back and forth reverse,
Yeah.
by hand, it was really easy just to crank it back the other way. So it wasn't we don't know how to build this
It was
technology.
a design
It's,
choice, yeah.
we choose this instead. And at the time, turrets at least were light enough that you could do that. Obviously, that would change. But the Monitor's turret was power operated. And again, we beat this to death. It proved the concept that wooden ships are vulnerable. They knew that from 9 years before at Sinope, so this isn't new, but it drove home the emphasis. The Battle of Hampton Roads, the first day, was the U.S. Navy's worst defeat until the Second World War in terms of ships and men lost. So it proved the concept. And the 3rd point.
I'm ready. It better be amazing.
We've already alluded to it. It was
Okay.
the ram, the thing that came out of Hampton Roads that all the Europeans
Okay.
went gaga over was, yep, the ram works. If it works against a wooden ship, it'll work against an ironclad too, probably even better because they're a lot heavier and they're going to sink even faster. And so everyone went ram crazy. But that was no one had really thought about rams or had any reason to think about rams since like the galleys at Lepanto.
The triremes.
But once you start talking about armor, and now you have to find a way around that. Slap the ram on the bow, and it was effective. It took the Cumberland down, and
fascinating modern age we live in.
So those are the 3 things that did it. I think
Those are important in their own way. But I think the point that we have is that, yet again, American exceptionalism in the Civil War is rife. Even in scholarship, even amongst historians.
in popular scholarship for sure.
And it would, for anyone interested in the Civil War, I think you should reevaluate what you think the Civil War changed about the world, and maybe the importance that we place on how the Civil War changed the world is really more reflective of how much it means to us, because the Civil War, of course, is so meaningful to America.
And there's an assumption just because it's the first time, and there were a lot of these first time X happened.
Yeah.
Or the first time someone dug trenches when the enemy had rifles. Because it happened here, we assume, well, we came up with something brilliant and revolutionary that no one else had thought of before. because this is the first time in the context of the American Civil War. It's the first time two warships with armor fought each other. And that is true. I would argue the reason it hadn't already happened before is because there hadn't been another war in Europe. If there was a war in Europe in 1859, you would have seen ironclads shooting at each other. But there wasn't. So it just...
And for a long time, there hadn't been like a peer war. You know, if there was a war, it was the Russians absolutely destroying the Turkish fleet, or the absolutely overwhelming British and French navies bottling up the Russian fleet. You know, it wasn't until Lissa that you have two relatively equal powers. Sorry, Austria. You know, duking it out in the Adriatic. So it's I think you would have been.
Austria won that battle, by the way.
I know. I know. In a way. I don't think anyone really won that battle. But yes, they won. Well, that was an interesting discussion. Thank you for joining us with our pedantic rant, and hopefully this has made you sufficiently angry to leave a comment.
Yes, I can't wait to see the comments.
Yes. So the Monitor and the Merrimack, they're lame. Battle of Hampton Roads doesn't matter. Please leave a comment. And remember to check out The Historical Gamer. Thanks, Matt. Shall we away?
So what's next?
What's next? I don't know. Shall we tell someone else they're wrong on the internet?
Yeah, we have to find something.
Yes. If you can think of anyone who's wrong on the internet, leave a comment. And we can't do a dramatic exit because we are mic'd up.
We're shackled to this modern technology.
I am going to yell cut. And hopefully I will remember, turn the camera off.